I'm not very good at introductions, so I'll try to make this one as painless as possible. Uh, so, I just want to say thank you to whoever's watching this right now. It really means the world to me that you are using your valuable time to watch my silly little video. And I also want to thank everybody who watched the previous videos. It really means the world to me that you would sit down and actually watch one of my videos and check out my channel. But today I have for you guys a video that I've been working on for quite a while, and one that I've, really tried to think about, and it's something that I really think isn't really talked about. And today I'm going to bring you 3 stories that I think are perfect examples of the ghost in the machine, but they're creepypastas. So I guess without further ado, let's get on with it. With the recent advancements of AI and technological science as a whole, one can fantasize all the possible outcomes that such a stride in human ingenuity would have. Robots and the concept of artificial intelligence are nothing new, and for well over a century, artificial life forms have been a facet of literature, film, gaming, and now even everyday life. We often imagine such things as little less than novelties or tools in our new age. They're there to help us, or even write an essay for us. They clean our kitchen floors, or even replace human input altogether in hazard situations or heavy machinery. These automatons are little less than human built workhorses. They serve and nothing else. We joke about a robot uprising and how AI will be the fall of humanity, but in its current state, it might take a while. Jokes aside, for such thing to happen, there would have to be a very, very bad slip up in the machine's programming for something akin to the Terminator to occur. Machines are always learning, and with the advent of the internet, machine learning has become much easier and filtered, so concepts such as war, hatred, and contempt are things programmers and inventors might steer clear of. But what if there was some way for a human or an entity to transfer their animosity and hatred into an object? For the sake of the argument, let's say that object is a computer. One might think it's silly for something like a computer to be used as a conduit for somebody's hatred, but more mundane objects have been used for folklore surrounding cursed objects. Some in more recent history can be that of the Annabelle doll, or the painting The Hands Resist Him by Bill Stoneham, or even James Dean's Porsche 550 Spider. All 3 of these items are linked by one thing: death. I won't go into the backstories of all these items today, but all you have to know is that the items I just listed off have all been incorporated in the deaths of people or peoples associated with them, whether it would be directly or indirectly. One could say that the objects are cursed, or could even have an evil spirit harboring in them. Perhaps said spirit could have fixated on the object as it was something relevant or nearby to them at the time. Now let's say someone in the current year dies, and their soul has the ability to transfer itself to an inanimate object. There's a good chance that that person would transfer their essence to a piece of technology, like a phone, computer, or TV. But what happens if that person was exceptionally angry or sad? Would the object reflect that? That's a question that's often answered in the most unlikely of mediums: creepypastas. As hilarious as it sounds, they really hit the nail on the head on what the concept of the ghost in the machine really is. A human or an entity projecting themselves through a vessel that isn't human and is often a machination. One of the best examples of a human spirit assimilating itself into a piece of technology is Ben Drowned. The central premise of Ben Drowned revolves around a haunted video game cartridge. that being The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. In the story, Jadusable delves deeper, and they encounter an entity named Ben, who seems to possess knowledge beyond the game's programming, causing strange glitches, occurrences, and jump scares, thus blurring the line between the physical game and the supernatural conscience that is Ben. Despite being fictional, the way the story is presented really puts to the forefront the concept of the ghost in the machine. The titular Ben, who was the owner of the N64 cartridge that Jadusable came to own, isn't very explored in the story or even in the subsequent chapters. But we do know is how he died. It's in the title. He drowned. Ben's death in the story is something that is later discovered to be an unjust occurrence. I won't go into it myself, since I really haven't finished the story in its entirety, but Ben's life was snuffed out in a way that wasn't much of his choice. Imagine as a child your life is taken from you. It's something unthinkable to a child. But as your soul wanders and your animosity for the unfairness of your fate grows and it stays with you, you return to something that gave you so much joy. I imagine that's why Ben picked the median of an N64 game. It's one of the key reasons why Ben Drown is an excellent representation of its concept, and the exploration of how technology can serve as a vessel for manifestation of supernatural and sentient forces. The Haunted Game cartridge became a conduit for Ben to tell a story and unveil what was behind the scenes, revealing a consciousness that seemingly transcended the digital boundaries of the game. This mirrors the philosophical ideas that systems like computers or game consoles, or even the games that come for the consoles, could potentially be a suitable substitute for a human spirit to possess and harbor a level of consciousness and agency that defines what a game should be able to do. The concept of the ghost in the machine works really well here with Ben Drowned. Being able to put your consciousness into a video game that you love a whole lot is a concept that Creepypastas love to do, and it was kind of why I got the idea to do this. But yeah, I think that Ben Drown is a really good example of the ghost in the machine in a modern sense. But I mean, if I were to die, I'd probably come back as a copy of Pokemon Crystal or something. What would you guys come back as? Let's take the concept of the ghost in the machine, and instead of using a lost soul, for example, we use something that's a little bit more malevolent. Something that's entire existence is to cause as much suffering as possible. Misfortune GB delves into the concept of something evil embedding itself into something as innocuous as a Game Boy cartridge. The general concept of the story revolves around the game, Misfortune GB. Though unlike Ben Drown's singular N64 cartridge, the game is hidden away in multiple different games. Some of well-known titles, being Pokemon Red and Link's Awakening, to name a few. The story never explains whether or not it means all the copies of the game have this hidden in them, or if it's only some of the copies that possess the game. But the story does explain that finding the game itself is difficult. Basically, the stars have to align for you to find this hidden game. But if you're unlucky enough to access the game, you'll be greeted by a creature that claims to exist in the very fabric of reality. It's unknown who the being really is, but it seems to be a primordial force. As if you accept its challenge to play the game, it holds the price of failure over your head, claiming misfortune will befall your loved ones. In its seemingly random assortment of challenges, from trap rooms to riddles, the dangers of making a mistake could cost you everything. For if the player loses and is shown the end screen, then that's when the real loss occurs. The player could become jittery or sick, or generally miserable or depressed. And in some circumstances, they could even end their own existence. A creature with such contempt and influence would find itself right at home in such a medium. Its spread would be catastrophic if the game was more accessible, and just knowing about it is dangerous. This story really embodies the concept of the ghost in the machine, but it's turned on its head. It's not just a random lost soul. This is the spirit of something incredibly nefarious. Kind of reminds me of Rocco's Basilisk. Could you imagine if a game like this existed in real life and was way more accessible than what it is in the story? The human population would drop drastically, especially with how fast information spreads today. But who's to say a brainworm like this doesn't already exist? In contrast to the two examples we spoke about earlier, NES Godzilla takes the concept of the ghost of the machine and makes it something personal. Imagine a childhood classic of yours suddenly drawing parallels to past events in your life. The levels becoming concepts of what you had to face, and NPCs becoming people you had to lose. The protagonist, Zack, receives a cartridge of Godzilla, Monster of Monsters for the NES, from their friend Billy. Its original owner is ambiguous from the beginning, but eventually the game starts to show its anomalies. Different monsters, some from the Godzilla franchise, and others abominations hatched by the game itself. One of the more prominent monsters in the story, Red, the primary antagonist, is a creature that I can only imagine is a manifestation of negativity felt by Zack's girlfriend, Melissa, who is also in the game in the form of a blue angelic female creature, in contrast to Red's hellish appearance. But before I go on, I'll give a brief explanation to Melissa's importance to Zack and the game. Melissa is a perfect example of the ghost in the machine. You see, Melissa was Zack's girlfriend years before he got his hands on the game. The new one, at least. He mentioned how she would have episodes where she would go completely catatonic, and eventually she would bury her hands in her face and tremble for several minutes, as if she had just gone through something terrible or seen something. One of these episodes, unfortunately, is what led to her eventually taking her own life. One night while staring at the moon on a hill, she had a particularly bad episode, but instead of trembling and hiding her face, she continued to stare at the moon. Whereafter she ran into oncoming traffic and was struck by a truck. In my personal headcanon, I like to think that Red was with her forever. He was a part of Melissa, a personal demon that she had to fight, that he followed her even into death. Maybe in passing, Zack mentioned the Godzilla game, and she decided to embed herself into a copy that Billy or someone that he knew, or that they both knew, would eventually be passed down to Zack. Despite the circumstances of how the game fell into Zack's hand, one thing is an absolute: the dichotomy of Red and Melissa. Melissa protects and even gives Zack's monsters to fight Red, and at the very end gives him the silver bullet to take him out. Whereas Red torments Zack, chasing him through levels, taunting him, and even saying this to him. Both have a connection to Zack, which is linked back to the cartridge. The game even asks him questions in the form of the face quiz. Again, to me this seems like an example of Melissa trying to help Zack, however rudimentary it is. She bestows Zack with two monsters in this way, but due to the involvement with Zack, Face is later killed, presumably by Red, only to be brought back later by Melissa, along with the other monsters at the end of the story. I've passed over a lot of other details in the story, but ultimately, the main part of the story that boils down to the concept of the ghost in the machine is how the game communicates with Zack. It even hurts Zack at some points in the game. It brings up past traumas and makes him relive those traumas. He's even physically hurt by Red around the end of the story. It even makes him think of the girl that he once loved, and how that same girl battles for influence over him over the same demon that haunted her all those years ago. One can only imagine what happened if Melissa wasn't in the game and Red had full authority over Zack. He might have suffered the same fate. But thankfully Melissa was there waiting for however many years in that cartridge, and served as a voice of reason for Zack and the hellscape that Red had prepared for him, and was ultimately defeated at the end, thus banishing the evil in the machine, and finally allowing Melissa to pass on to the afterlife. After many setbacks, technical issues, re-recordings, and script rewriting, the video is finally done. Finally finished this thing after a few days. It's 3 a.m. and I'm about to upload this. So, yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, just leave me a like or comment, or, just watch the video or whatever. But anyways, thank you for watching, and I just want to say that it was a pleasure to make this video. It was super fun. I got to play a lot of older games for this, so yeah, tell me what you think, and have a good night. I'm going to sleep.
See a combo though. Ooh. Us. Woo. Fucking lame shit.